Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hello, friends. I hope you are doing well and enjoying the summer and potentially enjoying a few summer romance books. If you need any suggestions for summer romance books, just visit my summer reading hub on shereadsromancebooks.com and you will find all of my summer reading lists there in one spot to choose from. Some of my favorites are from my list of books about summer romance where the characters fall in love over multiple summers. I actually have a few that I should probably add to that list from this June reading list because, I don't know, that topic is becoming super popular for summer romance themed books and I'm totally loving it. I'm so on board. Also, don't forget that you can check out my Passport to Romance, which is a really fun summer reading challenge that gives you new romance book titles to read this summer that are going to take you all around the world and all around the United States with the settings of those books. So totally perfect for a staycation if you don't have any vacation plans for this summer. You can download your passport within the She Reads Romance Books book club and then turn it in by the end of August for your chance to win one of my A Year of Reading Romance card decks. If you haven't heard of that, I absolutely love it. It is a deck of 52 cards, the size of like playing cards, with reading prompts on them that can help you pick your next book and help you explore the variety within the romance genre. It's pretty awesome, if I do say so myself, and you have a chance to win one by playing Passport to Romance this summer. But on to my reading list from June, which honestly is kind of a mixed bag. Some I really loved, some were great, some just a few okay, and some that were not quite my cup of tea. This month, I also really doubled down on books available on Kindle Unlimited because I put a hold on my subscription at the end of the month because I realized I really need to crank out some advanced reader copies of books. So I'm going to read those arcs and then renew my subscription and then go back to just binging on KU after that. I've also been listening to audiobooks a bit more, taking advantage of those that I can snag either on Hoopla or listen to with my premium Spotify account. I don't know if you've heard that if you have a premium account on Spotify, you now have 15 hours of audiobook listening each month, which is, sort of about 2 audiobooks. They have a really great selection of romance books, particularly newly published audiobooks. So it's a really great bonus if you have premium Spotify, and I'm happily using that benefit, which is a really great deal. So I highly recommend it. All right. So the first book that I read this month is one that I listened to on Spotify, and that is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. It is one of my all-time favorite romance books and such a fun one about two people who take summer trips together and fall in love in the process over the years. So instead of a reread of this book, I decided to check out the audiobook, and it was phenomenal. As an aside, I totally just put out my list of the best audiobooks that are going to make you an audiobook convert, and this is on it because I absolutely loved it. Julia Whelan is the narrator of this audiobook, and she's just wonderful. No wonder that so many people want her to voice their books. Sometimes, and I think I say this a lot, I just can't get into an audiobook, but I loved listening to this story. If anything, it just sort of made me fall for Poppy and Alex even more than I already had. And that's pretty much saying something because I could just really feel their connection, and their banter was just so much fun to hear in the audiobook. And I don't think I remembered just how much I loved their back and forth in this book between Poppy's quirkiness and Alex's dry humor. Henry's dialogue in this book is just what makes this book a 5-star romance for me. But in case you have not read this, then, or if you even need a refresher of what this friends to lovers romance is about, here is the summary. 2 best friends, 10 summer trips, one last chance to fall in love. Poppy and Alex, Alex and Poppy, they have nothing in common. She's a wild child, he wears khakis. She has insatiable wanderlust, and he prefers to stay home with a book. And somehow, ever since a fateful car share home from college many years ago, they are the very best of friends. For most of the year, they live apart. She's in New York City and he's in their small hometown. But every summer for a decade, they have taken one glorious week of vacation together. Until 2 years ago, when they ruined everything and they haven't spoken since. Poppy has everything she could want, but she's stuck in a rut. When someone asks when she was last truly happy, she knows without a doubt it was on that ill-fated final trip with Alex. And so she decides to convince her best friend to take one more vacation together, lay everything on the table, and make it right. Miraculously, he agrees. Now she has a week to fix everything, if only she can get around the one big truth that has always stood quietly in the middle of their seemingly perfect relationship. What could possibly go wrong? So yes, this is hands down one of my favorite friends to lovers romance books because Henry's writing is just excellent, and I just loved these characters and the crazy trips they went on. Poppy and Alex are complete opposites, no lie there, and yet they are totally each other's person, and I loved how they finally had the courage to kind of cross that line to become more. This book made me legit bawl my eyes out, even with the second reread or re-listen, because my heart was just aching for them at parts for what they couldn't say to one another, but undoubtedly felt. It's just a must-read overall and a perfect one for your summer reading list or listening list if you haven't checked it out already. The next book that I had my eyes on for a while, and it made my list of most anticipated romance books of 2024. So thankfully it was time to read it in anticipation of its release in early June. And that book is Just Some Stupid Love Story by Caitlin Doyle. And here is what it's about. Molly Marks writes Hollywood rom-coms for a living, which is how she knows romance is a racket. The one and only time she was naive enough to fall in love was with her high school boyfriend, Seth, who she ghosted on the eve of graduation and hasn't seen in 15 years. Seth Rubinstein believes in love, the grand faded kind, despite his job as, well, one of Chicago's most successful divorce attorneys. Over the last decade, he sought the one in countless bad dates and rushed relationships. He knows his soulmate is out there, but so far, no one can compare to Molly Marks, the first girl who broke his heart. When Molly's friends drag her to Florida for their 15th high school reunion, it is poetic justice that she's forced to sit with Seth. Too many martinis and a drunken hookup later, they decide to make a bet. Whoever can predict the fate of 5 couples before the next reunion must declare that the other is right about true love. The catch, the 5th couple is the 2 of them. Molly assures Seth they are a tale of timeless heartbreak. Seth promises she'll end up hopelessly in love with him. She thinks he's delusional. He has 5 years to prove her wrong. Oh my gosh, you guys. I was so looking forward to reading this book because this was Caitlin Doyle's debut contemporary romance, when I have already loved so many of her historical romance novels that she's written under the pen name Scarlett Peckham. And let me just start by saying that I loved this book, gave it 5 stars, and I cannot wait to read more from her. Just Some Stupid Love Story is just this beautiful, quirky, second chance romance between 2 complete opposites who once loved each other as teenagers, but whose hearts were broken on their high school graduation day. Then, of course, flash forward 15 years and they find themselves face to face again for the first time at their high school reunion that Molly begrudgingly attends. So this awkward re-meet cute set the stage for how much these 2 just sort of fit one another despite their complete opposite views on love and relationships. Seth is just this adorable, cinnamon roll type hero that I don't usually gravitate to, but I could not help but fall for this guy. This man was desperate to find his soulmate, his partner, his wife, yet he pretty much knew that it was the woman he fell for at age 14. Molly, however, she is the heroine, afraid of relationships. She's carrying around some significant daddy issues and family trauma that kept her from ever fully embracing relationships. And since she broke up with Seth, because she'd rather be the one to leave than be the one who was left. But Doyle weaves this incredible slow burn, second chance romance between these two opposites that really made me believe that they could finally find their happily ever after together. Her characterizations were just so spot on, but she didn't really succumb to generalizations that could have made this book seem predictable at best. Instead, my heart just ached for these two when they couldn't get their timing quite right or when they fell victim to their same old patterns. But at the same time, I also loved their maturity in that they could recognize their destructive patterns and try and work on them together because they truly loved each other. And it was just wonderful. This book is why I love reading romance, and this is a book that reminds me why. So Molly and Seth could have easily rubbed me the wrong way, but Doyle's banter and self-reflections were just so well written that I was hooked and thoroughly enjoyed this read. It's truly one of the best romance books of 2024 that I've read so far this year, and I highly recommend it. And it's pretty funny how the storyline is very similar to the rom-commers, which we are reading as our July pick for the She Reads Romance Books book club. Although in the rom-commers, the heroine believes in love and is a fan of rom-coms. She's a screenwriter. But in this story, it's sort of the flip side where the heroine doesn't believe in love, even though she writes rom-coms, and the hero is all gaga over love. So pretty cool. I definitely think you should read both. Okay, done gushing all over that book. My next book was another advanced reader copy that I had put off until I had the perfect moment to read it, and that is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, which also released in June and was another one of my most anticipated new romance books of 2024. And here is what it's about. Rue Siebert might not have it all, but she has enough. A few friends she can always count on, the financial stability she yearned for as a kid, and a successful career as a biotech engineer at Klein, one of the most promising startups in the field of food science. Her world is stable, pleasant, and hard-fought until a hostile takeover and its offensively attractive frontman threatens to bring it all crumbling down. Eli Kilgore and his business partners want Klein, period. Eli has his own reasons for pushing this deal through, and he's a man who gets what he wants. With one burning exception, Rue, the woman he can't stop thinking about, the woman who's off limits to him. Torn between loyalty and an undeniable attraction, Rue and Eli throw caution out the lab and the boardroom windows. Their affair is secret, no strings attached, and has a built-in deadline. The day one of their companies will prevail. But the heart is risky business, one that plays for keeps. Okay, first off, this book also counts towards the June 2024 Romance Book Reading Challenge, where one of the prompts was to choose a book by its cover. And I just adore the cover for Not in Love. It's a bit different from all the other illustrated covers with you have images of both characters sort of separate on the cover, but this book has an image of both characters sort of embracing, and it almost seems like manga illustrated or manga vibe to it. But the picture and the colors, oh my gosh, it's just gorgeous. So definitely worth a book, just picking it by its cover. But after reading this book, I had started off my review saying, I don't think there will ever be a book that Ali Hazelwood writes that I won't read, even when she deviates from the STEM-focused enemies to lovers books she's known for, because she will captivate me each and every time. Considering her last 3 romance book releases were 5+ stars to me, I loved them. I had super high expectations for this book, especially when she shared a note to readers saying that this book was different from any other that she'd written, much more steamy and an erotic romance at that. But if that little tidbit was supposed to be a warning, it really only made me want to snatch this book up that much faster. Let me stop there a bit and say that if an author tells you that this is different from their prior work, then take her word for it and either don't read it or don't expect it to be what you've read in the past. She tells you that this book is different from her previous works, and it really is. So I don't think all of her fans will necessarily like it, but I really enjoyed it. Does it unseat any of her 5-star reads as the top book for me? No, but I'm totally glad that I read it. And like I said, I really enjoyed it. So let's also get into definitions for a minute. So she says that this is an erotic romance, which according to its definition, it is, because if you took away Rue and Eli's physical sexual relationship, then there wouldn't really be a whole heck of a lot to this story. Or more accurately, I should say, not a whole heck of a lot to their relationship development. But at the same time, I think people get a certain imagery when it comes to erotic romance. It's not a tantalizing, erotic romance, which is sort of where my mind can go when I conjure up erotic romance examples. It's definitely spicy because when you first meet Rue and Eli, they have connected via a dating app and agreed to meet up for some plain and simple fucking. A mere transaction where both bodies are shared for each other's pleasure, nothing more. And yet their simple meeting doesn't go as planned, setting up not only this intense and immediate attraction that becomes unfulfilled, but also a storyline that exposes two people dealing with some real shit. And I liked that so much. So yes, this is an erotic romance in that Rue and Eli, though on opposite sides of this corporate takeover, cannot deny their attraction and end up getting together to pretty much, fuck on multiple occasions. And it's these continued physical encounters that are the basis of their eventual emotional connection and relationship, if that makes sense. The focus of this book is really how Rue felt most comfortable keeping their, quote, relationship a simple body transaction versus actually exposing her true self. And yet at the same time, they would hook up. And they also started this habit of then sharing their most personable and, quote, horrible, as they described them, stories about themselves that just laid themselves bare to one another. In those moments when they just got vulnerable and shared those stories were my absolute favorite parts of this book. In that personal sharing is what set that foundation of their trust, acceptance, and love for each other when regular dating was completely skipped over. So it was brilliant. Usually it's Ali Hazelwood's heroines that captivate me, but Eli totally stole the show in this one. Oh, how I loved this man, and probably did so because this book was told from dual point of view, so it was easy to get into his head and really see how special this man truly was. He saw this woman, her social awkwardness and all, had no interest in changing her. He was a man who fell first and hard and just worked his way into her heart slowly but surely, as he knew he was dealing with a woman who could really easily bolt at any second. Rue was definitely a unique heroine, possibly neurodivergent, not that she necessarily needs a label, but she had this unique backstory, though I kind of found it hard to connect with her. I loved the moments, though, when she would just sort of push past her hesitations, and those were super sweet. So it's a story about how these two strangers fall hard and fast despite the unfortunate work situation they are in. Their friends are involved, but they sort of paled in the background for me. And though Rue's work is STEM focused, it wasn't a huge part of the story, but did give an interesting angle to the company and storyline that connected them. So again, while this book didn't blow me away like Bride or Check and Mate, though I loved the quick nod to that book in this story, two other books that also deviate from her signature STEM and female-focused romance books, I enjoyed this all the same and definitely highly recommend it if you love her work. The next book is another that fits the June 2024 Romance Book Reading Challenge because the book cover is just stunning, and that is To Catch a Firefly by Emmy Sanders, and here is what it's about. There's a lot I've never told my best friend. The fact that I love him, that I miss him every day he's gone, that sometimes I ache for him with a ferocity that leaves me breathless. Lucky Buchanan tore into my life as a boy, wild and daring, my opposite in every way. He drew me in, stole my heart without trying. He hears me even though I rarely speak a word, but I always knew this place wouldn't be enough for my free-spirited friend. I knew he wasn't mine to keep. So why, when I finally tried to get over him, does he sweep back into town? Why is he upset? Why is there tension between us for the first time in years? I never saw a future where Lucky could be mine, but now, unless I want to lose my friend, I might not have a choice but to tell the truth. My heart belongs to him. It has from the start. If only I knew how to hold onto a creature that's meant to fly. So this book that I just randomly came across in Kindle Unlimited, and after reading the summary, just had to read it and add it to my list of must-read new queer romance books of 2024, as it released earlier this year in February. So as I've mentioned before, the one reason I love my Kindle Unlimited subscription is because it's just this stress-free way to check out new authors that I've never read before. This was my first Emmy Sanders book and won't be my last because I really enjoyed it. It's a quick read that is a friends to lovers romance. What I loved most is that it does not have a third act breakup. Although I felt myself getting anxious as the book went on, just waiting for that other shoe to drop, something that would destroy the love story building between these two friends. But luckily it didn't happen, as I think it probably would have just ruined the story for me, adding in some just unnecessary drama, if you will. So this is really a book that you'll want to read if you love sweet friends to lovers romance books, and if you like books that are a bit of a slow burn and just give you that happily ever after that you're looking for. But as I said, if you like angst or drama or stories where the characters have to really overcome something, then this isn't the book for you. I picked it because I like that one of the characters has select mutism, someone who only says the bare minimum when he does have something to say, but whose actions and body language often speak volumes more than their words. I loved these characters that Sanders creates. A quiet boy who grew up in the cornfields of Nebraska and the gay boy who moves in next door from New York City. A kid who wants to be anywhere else, but they become instant best friends. And it's their story of how they're just such close friends, but how Lucky has always wanted to leave Nebraska and see the world while Ellis has to stay to take care of his ailing mother. It's how their friendship turned to love for both of them, but never sharing it for reasons of their own until they finally do. I love the parts when Lucky is describing all of his travels to Ellis, and the epilogue is also super, super cute too. I think anyone who's read Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan will love this, and it gave me similar vibes to Tal Bauer's book, How to Say I Do, that I read and loved last year, in terms of how both characters are a bit opposite and yet fit so well together. It's not a particularly steamy book, but it is definitely one that I recommend. Okay. The next book is another that I listened to as an audiobook with my Spotify premium subscription, and that is Falling for Gage by Mia Sheridan, which is also another book on my most anticipated new romance books of 2024 list. So man, I was banging out a lot of those this month. I wanted to listen to it because I love her writing and I love the books in her Pellean Lake series. I had read the previous book in that series, Travis, last year, where I first met Gage, but you can definitely read this as a standalone. But you do get appearances by Travis and Archer of Archer's Voice and their families in this one, so just know that. But it doesn't spoil either of those books, I think. The audiobook has dual narration in that there is a male and female narrator who switch off by chapters, but here is what the book is about. How is it possible that perfect Gage Buchanan is still single after all these years? He can't figure it out himself. Perhaps he hasn't met the right woman. Maybe he spent too many years focusing on work, or maybe he just isn't as perfect as everyone thinks he is. Gage thought he left his days of one-night stands behind him. However, something about the gorgeous cocktail waitress in a town 3 hours away is far too intriguing. But when she shows up weeks later in his hometown, Calliope, pretending to be an art appraiser, Gage is completely blindsided, not to mention still very attracted to the apparent little liar. He can't figure her out, not her angle, nor the persistent pull between them. Aurora Rory Castile is determined to find her father. All she knows from her late mother is that he lives in Calliope and he's an important part of the town. So when Rory's gallery-owning friend offers to run cover for her while she sleuths around town, she jumps at the chance. But she doesn't anticipate the man she spent one wild night with turning out to be a local. Sure, it puts a wrinkle in Rory's plan, but she can work around Gage Buchanan. Even as it gets harder to pretend, her heart doesn't flip every time he's in the room. She has a suspicion he isn't everything he seems either, but maybe it's perfect Gage's flaws that are really what she's drawn to. I liked this romance, but probably would have liked it even more if I had read it, as I think the audiobook felt a bit drawn out, but that's me with audiobooks sometimes, I guess. I liked that Gage is the eligible bachelor about town who's ready to settle down, and he's juggling responsibilities as the heir and son who has to continue the family legacy. The back and forth between Gage and Rory was fun when they first met, and you could sense their attraction from that first one-night stand. When they run into each other again, this time, Rory posing as an art appraisal was really funny with the way she, was evading him around town. I liked, though, that how he then started helping her with her quest to find her father. But I also think the pragmatist in me got a bit annoyed because I was like, can't you go up and ask people and say, hey, are you the artist? Because she was trying to identify her father by this artistic painting. Seemed like a lot of running around for nothing, but then I guess you wouldn't have had much of a story or forcing them together in a different situation. But again, I'm like, this could have been solved a lot easier and a lot faster, but I had to get that out of my head to enjoy the story. So I wouldn't say that I fell in love with these characters or their story and won't really be rereading it, but I still enjoyed listening to it and would recommend it if you read the previous books in Sheridan's series. Moving on from that one then, the next book I read because it was in Kindle Unlimited and had a lot of good reviews, and I've enjoyed this author duo's books before, and that is What I Should Have Said by Max Monroe, which is a small town enemies to lovers romance that released in April of this year. And here is what it's about. When grumpy, muscled up artist Bennett Bishop bothers to speak, it's usually to say something you're not ready to hear. When he first speaks to Nora Ellis, a rambling runaway bride who hitchhikes a ride from him, it's to tell her to get out of his truck and walk because she's a pain in the ass. By appearance, Nora Ellis is a fancy fashionista who spent the last several years living the good life in the city, expensive apartments, highbrow events, and a fiancé with wealth and good looks. The only problem is she didn't choose any of it for herself. On the day of her July wedding, thanks to a letter from a stranger, Nora's world turns upside down. She runs for the hills of Vermont to start a new life, but what's waiting for her between her estranged sister, the townspeople, and bad boy Bennett Bishop himself is way more than she bargained for. Enemies turn to lovers, strangers become friends, dark secrets bust open like cans of worms, and most of all, summer will never be the same. So, as I said, this book has over 8,000 reviews on Goodreads and was on a freaking billboard in New York City, but I stopped reading it at about the 63% in mark because I should have been invested in the story by that point, but I just didn't care for the main characters, found it very slow, and stopped going in some directions that I just really didn't care to follow. I typically like enemies to lovers, and these two definitely didn't hit it off once Nora arrives in Redbridge, but I just connect with either of them, to be honest. For one, I think Nora's inability to share why she fled to Redbridge with her sister and just kept putting off her backstory. So I just found her to be unknown and maybe kind of boring, as I said. But I really, really didn't like the fact that she slapped Bennett on the face on more than one occasion. In this, after he ended up helping her with her ex who was manhandling her pretty roughly. So sorry, I just don't believe that you should ever put your hands on someone. And her slapping him was just really jarring to me in this book. And sure, he himself, Bennett, was so back and forth too, acting like a complete dick to her one moment and then just kissing her out of the blue another. And I just didn't like him. I mean, then there's this whole storyline with another character in Bennett's life that's going to make you cry, but I won't get into for spoilers. And then another storyline about the awful behavior of two people in Nora's life. And I just don't care to know more about either of those storylines. But that could just be me. Overall, I say their writing is good, but I didn't care for the characters, the story, and I had too many other books I wanted to read on vacation, so I stopped reading it, and I'm totally cool with that. I would skip this one because it's not their typical fun rom-com, and check out one of their other books instead. Okay, the next book that I read, I had mentioned in my May 2024 reading list episode as one that was on my TBR list because it is available to read in Kindle Unlimited, and because Karen in book club totally convinced me that I have to move it up my TBR list. So I finally read The Graham Effect by Elle Kennedy, which came out at the end of 2023 and is the first book in her Campus Diaries series. This series is supposed to be a spinoff of her popular Off-Campus and Briar U series, and it will be about some of the kids from those characters. Not that every book will be, I'm discovering, so FYI there. But The Graham Effect became an instant New York Times bestseller, and it is about Gigi Graham, Garrett and Hannah Graham's daughter, the couple from The Deal, book 1 in the Off-Campus series. If you've read that new adult hockey romance, which you should if you have not yet, definitely pick it up. But then here is what The Graham Effect is about. Gigi Graham has exactly 3 goals: qualify for the women's national hockey team, win Olympic gold, and step out of her famous father's shadow. So far, so good, except for 2 little things. Fine, a little thing and a big grumpy thing. She needs to improve her game behind the net, and she needs help from Luke Ryder. Ryder is 6'5", built, opinionated, rude, and sexy as hell, but he's still the enemy. Briar's new hockey co-captain has his reasons, though. The men's team just merged with a rival program, leaving Ryder with an angry roster where everyone hates one another's guts. To make matters worse, the summer coaching spot he's angling for with legendary Garrett Graham is out of reach after he makes the worst possible first impression on his hero. So really, this compromise with Gigi is win-win. He helps her make the national team, and she puts in a good word with her dad. The only potential snag: this bone-deep, body-numbing, mind-spinning chemistry they're trying to ignore. It's a dangerous game they're playing, but the risks just might be worth it. If you read and loved The Deal, then I definitely think you have to read this book. I loved the moments you get with Hannah and Garrett, so that was a super nice bonus. Even Coach Jensen was hilarious and a fun character to see again. Overall, I liked this book, but a few things just kept me from loving it, so I think I maybe rated it 3.5 stars. I can't remember off the top of my head. I like how they were kind of enemies to start, who came up with this plan to help each other out. Gigi having this goal to make Team USA, which I loved, and Ryder, who really wants to work on that hockey camp with her dad. Cool setup in a good forced proximity situation, but that pack just sort of went to the wayside once they started hooking up. If you like grumpy sunshine hockey romance books, then this will definitely be your jam. I love that it's actually a hockey romance with some hockey in it. Go figure. Gigi was cool, and I like that she could get Ryder out of his shell because he was a man of very few words. But when he did speak, he had some nice dirty talking moments, not gonna lie. One of my favorite quotes from this book is Ryder saying, "Telling you how good I want to make you feel, telling you how good you make me feel. That's the kind of talking I'm decent at." And then Gigi replies, "Then I'm going to have to keep you talking." It was pretty cute. But as much as I liked their growing relationship, something happens later in the book that just seemed very jarring for them, and I felt like it was just this filler to cause a rift between Gigi and her dad. I didn't like it, so that is probably what soured me a bit on this book, when I felt like it really could have been great if it was just not so long and the story was sort of tightened up a bit. But that's just me. I just got The Dixon Rule from the library, which is book 2 in this series, and holy moly, is that a huge book too. Maybe I'll read it. I'm not quite sure because it's another enemies to lovers book, but I may hold out until Will and Beckett's story, which sounds like it's going to be a pretty hot one based on some things planted in this book. So we shall see, but I'm going to hope that they get a story real soon. All right. The next book I read was I read on Kindle Unlimited because I wanted to escape to Montana in the pages, as I love romance books that inspire travel. And Montana is one of the 8 U.S. states that I've yet to travel to, but it is on my bucket list. I just want to go and see the vast scenery and take in all the nature while riding on a horseback. Sounds fantastic, but until I can do that, I'm going to have to pretend I'm there right along with the characters in Crossroads by Devney Perry, which is the first book in her new series called Haven River Ranch. And if you want to experience Montana, get it from a true source, as Devney Perry is from and lives in Montana. As a total quick aside, not sure if you saw a recent reel on Instagram, but Devney flies airplanes. She put this really cool reel together where she's piloting this really tiny private plane and took you on this flight around Montana. It was amazing, and I couldn't believe that she was a pilot. I mean, she does bookbinding, she writes books. I mean, this woman sort of does it all, I tell you. But Crossroads released in early June and is another romance about falling in love over multiple summers because, as I said, everyone is jumping on this bandwagon of a theme. And here is what it's about. I met West Haven when I was 8 years old. He taught me to play poker when I was 9. And we made paper airplanes together when I was 11. He kissed me when I was 16, and he was the best part of my family's summer vacations to Montana. He was the boy who stole my heart. I was 23 when life ripped us apart. Years later, I'm breaking my vow and returning to the ranch, not as a guest, but its new owner. Wes might want me gone, but even he has to admit the only way to save his family's legacy is with my help. It's not easy working side by side and facing those old memories, but this situation is only temporary. We're at a crossroads, and as long as I don't let myself fall in love with West Haven again, maybe this is our chance to put those ghosts to rest. Maybe this time we'll finally be able to say goodbye. This was an enjoyable read, I have to say. Interesting how India was returning to a ranch she had visited many summers as a child, teen, and young adult, only now as the new owner, much to the surprise of West, the original owner's son. He's pretty pissed because this land had been part of his family for generations, but India saves it and restores it to something pretty amazing. It alternates between the present tense, where West and India clash until their ultimate, attraction finally boils over, and the past, when India visits the ranch over summers past. I liked those past chapters to give them some history to their attraction, but often they only spent like 1 or 2 days together before she would leave, not to visit again until the following summer or sometimes years later. I'm not sure that I'll continue with the series, but I did enjoy reading this one. And as I said, if you love dude ranches or want to escape to Montana in the pages, then I definitely do think that this might be a book worth adding to your TBR list, especially if you're a fan of Devney Perry's books in the past. But this next book that I read, I also snagged in Kindle Unlimited this month, which was Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Nascosta. If I'm saying the author's name correctly, I'm not quite sure. This is book 1 in her Cambric Creek series, which came out in 2021. I thought I would totally jump on the monster romance train with this paranormal romance between a human and a minotaur in a world with all types of creatures and beings. And here is what it's about. Violet is a typical down-on-your-luck millennial, mid-20s, overeducated and drowning in debt, on the verge of moving into her parents' basement, when a lifeline appears in the form of a very unconventional job in neighboring Cambric Creek. She has no choice but to grab at it with both hands. Morning Glory Farm offers full-time hours, full benefits, and generous pay with no experience needed. There's only one catch. The clientele is grade A certified prime beef with the manly, meaty endowments to match. Hands-on work with minotaurs isn't something Violet ever considered as a career option, but she's determined to turn the opportunity into a reversal of fortune. With a stern, deep-voiced client begins to specially request her for his sessions at the farm, maintaining her professionalism and keeping him out of her dreams is easier said than done. Violet is resolved to make a dent in her student loans and afford name-brand orange juice, and a one-sided crush on an out-of-her-league Minotaur is not a part of her plan, unless her feelings aren't so one-sided after all. Okay, where do I start with this book? This book is only about 247 pages, but even at that shorter length, I started skimming pretty early on just to finish it. I think the writing is good, but the story just wasn't for me. I liked the beginning where she's contemplating working as a milking tech and going through her training. It was awesome, but I guess I just didn't finish, or I didn't find this book to be very sexy or very enticing. I don't know if it was meant to be that, given the whole milking situation. I don't know. After the training, honestly, all I could think about is trying to visualize their milking room and the bench and how she went about the milking. Like, was she in this bunker with the bench overhead? And so she had to reach up and jerk off the Minotaurs because, man, that would lead to some major repetitive strain if you're doing that all day. And I mean, where are the ergonomics to this job? So yeah, that is where I got focused on this book, which wasn't really what I thought I would be focusing on when I was reading a monster romance book. Maybe it's my fault because I went into thinking it'd be a little more erotic, since I think I saw that it was like a #1 seller in monster erotica when I added it to my list in Amazon. But it's actually just sort of this cute, albeit boring, love story between the milking tech and a Minotaur who loved her for her technique and then started courting her. But yeah, I skimmed it. I was so bored and I skimmed it. But I think I'll try another monster romance book after this. But this is one that, unless you're really interested in the topic, I would just say skip for now. Next up, I was excited to read my advanced reader copy of the last book in Megan Quinn's Vancouver Agitators series. So this is War, which is Posey's story. It's a hockey romance between a player and the coach's daughter. So it was pretty awesome. I have read all but one of the Vancouver Agitators books, and this one I think is going to be my favorite, along with the first book, Kiss and Don't Tell. While it is the 5th and final book to this hockey romance series, it can easily be read as a standalone, and I think you should read it as a standalone if you haven't read any of the other books, because it's vintage Megan Quinn, meaning this book has all the love, the laughter, and the spice I've come to expect and love about reading Megan Quinn's books. And this one totally delivers it all. So Posey, he is the bologna-eating softie, but who's also a bruiser on the ice. He's the defenseman you don't want to face in the world of hockey, but off the ice, he is the best friend and teammate you could ever ask for. Plus, as he loves to flaunt, he's responsible, or claims he is responsible, for all of his best buds' love relationships, because it's his interference that finally got them to their happily ever afters, so he believes. So I love that he finally gets his own in this story. Posey and Wiley have this initial meet cute in a bar, which was adorable. He had no idea who she was, but she made an impression that stuck with him for an entire year, until he comes face to face with her again, discovering that she's his coach's daughter. To further complicate matters, his coach strong arms him into hiring Wiley as his assistant, an assistant, mind you, he doesn't need, which lands her as his roommate, since she's also kicked out of her father's house, to, quote, learn a lesson. So first off, Coach Wood, Posey's coach, totally sucks. I mean, what a douchebag dad to ignore your daughter's interests and purposely try and make her life hell. Plus, he was pretty horrible in how he treated Posey. So Megan, almost went overboard in making him a really bad character, I thought. But Posey is a gem. Oh my gosh. I just loved this guy and his earnestness to be there for his teammates, and now struggle with his desire and attraction to Wiley when she was completely off limits. Their chemistry was super cute, and you're just waiting for them to finally push over that line and get it on already. While I love the bromance of Posey and his teammates in the previous books in the series, Quinn was a genius in changing things up for this book and creating a text thread between Posey and his queens, as he dubbed them, the girlfriends of his teammates, seeking out their advice on how to deal with his situation with Wiley, since he had to keep it kind of on the hush-hush and didn't want to bring his boys in quite yet. Their text threads were hilarious and really showed all of the girls like different personalities. So that was like one of the best parts of this book. So if you're looking for a super cute and super spicy book that is both hilarious and just super fun to read, I would definitely recommend So This Is War, as it did not disappoint. All right, we've made it to my last book of the month. The last book I read in June was an advanced reader copy of Tangled Up in You by Christina Lauren. This is a new adult romance that is a retelling of the Rapunzel story, as it is part of the Disney Meant to Be series. So far in that series, there's been a Cinderella modern retelling, a Beauty and the Beast modern retelling, a Little Mermaid modern retelling, and now this one about Rapunzel. So here is what it's about. Wren has never held an iPhone, Googled the answer to a question, or followed a crush on social media. What she has done, read a book or two, or three, okay, hundreds, taught herself to paint, built a working wind power system from scratch. But for all the books she's read, Wren has never found one that's taught a woman raised on a homestead and off the grid for most of her 22 years how to live in the real world. So when she finally achieves her lifelong dream of attending Corona College, it feels like her life is finally beginning. Fitz has the rest of his life mapped out, graduate from Corona at the top of his class, get his criminal record wiped clean, and pass himself off as the rich, handsome player everyone thinks he is. He's a few short months from checking off step one of his plans when Wren Glyden, with her cascading blonde hair and encyclopedia brain, crashes into his life, and for the first time, Fitz's plan is in jeopardy. But a simple assignment in their immunology seminar changes the course of both their lives, and suddenly they're thrown out of the frying pan and into the fire on a road trip that will lead them in the most unexpected directions. Out on the open road, the world somehow shifts, and the unlikely pair realize that maybe the key to the dreams they've both been chasing have been sitting next to them the whole time. Okay, I'll just get right to it and say it pains me to say that despite loving this author duo, I did not enjoy this book. I eventually started skimming it just to get to the end, but probably just should have put it in the do not finish pile. I think tackling any modern retelling is probably a difficult task, but taking on the Rapunzel story is maybe more difficult than most. I haven't read all of the Meant to Be books, but I did read By the Book, and I loved all of the nods to Beauty and the Beast that were sprinkled throughout that story. I was waiting and anticipating those gems in this story, but they either just fell completely flat or I just didn't see them to make the connections to the Rapunzel story. Sure, you get her painting a little, and you get the frying pan and this bar scene, and of course her hair, but even her hair, of all things, really didn't factor into the story like whatsoever. The main connection, though, between the tale and the modern retelling was the reason Wren was isolated for 20-some years in the first place. I should have known where this part of the storyline was going and checked out the trigger warnings beforehand, because I typically steer clear of this type of plot line where kidnapping or any harm to children is involved. What starts off as a cute story, about a girl from a homestead now going to college for this first time, it kind of turns pretty dark, to be honest. Overall, I just didn't connect with Wren or Fitz. Didn't even care about his backstory, which seemed a little convoluted. The beginning, when she first arrives at college, wasn't that gripping, and it just sort of went downhill from there for me. Their road trip I found anticlimactic, and it didn't really give enough for me to believe that they fell in love over these few days and then would stay together forever from that moment forward. I commend them on trying this retelling, but to me, it's a pass on this book. So, finishing on that note, that wraps up my June reading list. A few hits, a few misses, and a few okay reads. To make sure you don't miss my monthly roundup episodes or future podcast episodes or book lists, be sure to sign up for my newsletter if you haven't already. I will include a link in the show notes, and if you sign up, I will instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends, which I know you are absolutely going to love. I am cooking up some fun ideas for later this summer, so you are going to want to stay in the loop so you don't miss a thing. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Whew, it was a long one getting through all those books, but if you haven't yet left a review, I would so appreciate a quick note on your favorite podcast platform. I so appreciate it. But until next time, happy reading, because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.